Hey guys, tonight we slip through the dust of millennia, landing right at sunset in Mesopotamia's beating heart, Ur. You feel the day's lingering heat radiate up from sun-baked mud bricks as you shuffle through the towering gate of Ishtar. Donkeys bray, children shriek playing knucklebones in the alleys, and the sharp tang of wood smoke, dung, and frying onions hits you like a warm, slightly unpleasant blanket. Ahead, the great ziggurat looms, its stepped sides catching the last molten gold rays of the sun. You dodge a porter, sweating under a swaying load of pottery amphorae, probably date wine. It's crowded, louder than a New York subway station at rush hour, and honestly, the sanitation? Let's just say your 21st century immune system probably wouldn't survive the week. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Where in the world are you resting tonight? Post your location and local time below. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're here for ash and honey, for the alchemy of fire and sweetness, transforming gritty barley and river water into life. But first, survival. The city walls, thick as 3 chariots end to end, offer safety from raiders. But inside, it's a glorious, chaotic mess. Your sandals kick up fine, pale dust that coats everything. The baskets of lentils spilling onto a merchant's mat. The glossy dates piled high like jewels. The sweaty brow of the coppersmith hammering nearby. A water seller passes, his heavy goatskin sloshing, shouting prices in Sumerian. You catch words, shah, water. Essential, non-negotiable. 80% of people here won't see 40 summers. Dysentery, a bad tooth, a simple cut gone wrong. It's the constant hum beneath the market's roar. Historians still argue whether the famed Standard of Ur depicts a military triumph or a really enthusiastic grain delivery parade. Tonight, let's lean towards the grain. You smell it before you see the source, the communal bakery, that deep, earthy, slightly charred scent of barley bread baking. Not fluffy sourdough. Think dense, unleashed, gritty discs, baked directly on the hot walls of massive, beehive-shaped clay ovens, fueled by tamarisk wood and dried dung. Ash isn't just a byproduct here, it's an ingredient. Wood ash gives the bread a faint alkalinity, breaking down tough grains, making precious nutrients slightly more accessible. Quirky tidbit? Those bakers might also toss in a pinch of ground-up seashells for extra calcium. Don't knock it till you've tried it. Or maybe do knock it. Your stomach's already doing somersaults from the questionable well water you drank an hour ago. You press deeper into the throng, aiming for the canals glinting in the dying light. The Euphrates is the true lifeline, the muddy highway bringing fish, reeds, and the cool breath of possibility into this sun-scorched world. A gaggle of geese honk indignantly as you nearly trip over them. Someone's dinner, probably. You sidestep a suspiciously glistening puddle near a butcher's stall. Let's not look too closely. Ahead, a narrow alley promises a shortcut towards the residential quarter. Time to find a hearth, a pot, and the first whispers of honey. You squeeze out of the alley, blinking into the sudden openness of the main canal quayside. The air shifts instantly, heavier, wetter, smelling of mud, wet reeds, and something vaguely fishy. with undertones of things best left unidentified. The Euphrates isn't just a river here, it's the city's pulsing artery, its highway, its bathtub, and occasionally, its toilet. A wide, man-made channel branches off the mighty brown flow, slicing through like a sluggish, life-giving serpent. Flat-bottomed barges, piled high with bulging reed sacks of grain, crates of glazed pottery, and even bleeding goats, are being pulled towards the warehouses. You sidestep a sweating laborer hauling a dripping net full of silvery, wriggling fish, breakfast, lunch, and dinner for many. The water itself is the color of strong tea with too much milk, swirling with eddies of sediment. You wouldn't drink it unfiltered unless truly desperate, and even then, you'd probably regret it. That porter earlier, his amphora likely held water strained through reed mats and stored cool in thick clay jars, a precious, labor-intensive commodity. Mainstream fact: this intricate network of canals wasn't just for transport. It was the backbone of Mesopotamian agriculture, allowing irrigation that turned arid plains into fields of barley, wheat, onions, and sesame. Without it, starves. Simple as that. You skirt the edge of the quay, your sandals sinking slightly into the damp-packed earth. To your right, the canal bustles. To your left, the market proper explodes into chaotic life, pressing right up against the water's edge. Vendors shout over each other in a cacophony of Sumerian and Akkadian dialects. Sham, sham, buy, buy. A woman vigorously haggles over a string of dried river fish. Another merchant displays gleaming copper bowls, reflecting the low sun like fiery eyes. But smell? Imagine low tide at a fish market mixed with cumin, roasting meat somewhere unseen. Quirky tidbit: archaeologists found evidence of floating market stalls, little reed platforms moored along the canals. Selling everything from hot bread to, allegedly, haircuts. Imagine getting a trim while bobbing gently above the dubious water. Historians still argue whether the Queen's Lyre from was played during banquets or just buried. Given the Mesopotamians' love of music, feasting, and beer, I'm betting it saw some action. You pause near a date seller, his wrinkled fruits sticky and dark as molasses. Are piled in woven palm leaf baskets. Dates are nature's candy here, energy-packed, easily stored, and fermented into that potent wine. He offers you a sample on a shard of broken pottery. It's intensely sweet, almost caramel-like, with a hint of smokiness. Lol, he grins, tapping his chest. Honey, the real prize. You see small clay jars, sealed with wax and bitumen nearby, likely holding the precious golden liquid. Honey wasn't just a sweetener. It was medicine, a preservative, and an offering fit for the gods. Getting it meant dealing with wild bees or brave beekeepers in marshes. A grubby-faced child, maybe 6, holds up a wooden toy sheep. 1 sheh, 1 grain of barley. You smile and move on before her hopeful look breaks your 21st century heart. Haggling is fierce, a ritualized dance, more about performance than price. Think of it as Black Friday, but every day, without the trampling, and with more donkey dung. A water clock drips near a scribe's stall, marking late afternoon. Shadows lengthen. Light turns golden. Down by the water, fishermen haul in their final nets of the day. A carp gleams, A catfish slinks. Offal tossed to ducks squabbling in the shallows. The thump of grain pounding in stone mortars drifts from courtyards. You step around a suspicious puddle, press deeper. Narrow lanes wind toward mud brick homes. The scent of wood smoke thickens. That's where real magic happens, where barley, water, ash, fire, and maybe honey become sustenance. Time to leave the river's noisy embrace and seek the quiet alchemy of a Bronze Age kitchen. You duck under a low lintel, leaving the alley's dusty golden light behind. Instantly, the world shrinks. Cooler, quieter, much smokier. Welcome to your borrowed Mesopotamian home, a windowless cube of sun-dried mud brick, barely 20 paces across. The floor is packed earth, worn smooth by generations of bare feet. Your eyes sting slightly as they adjust to the gloom, pierced only by shafts of light slicing through gaps in the palm frond roof, covering the central courtyard. That smell? Wood smoke, yes, but layered with damp clay, drying herbs, stale sweat, and the faint, sweet-sour tang of fermenting grain. It's not unpleasant, just dense, intimate. A family of 5 lives here, plus a scruffy dog dozing by the hearth, and a chicken pecking near a grinding stone. Mainstream fact: over 90% of Ur's population lived in houses like this. Single-story, multi-room structures huddled shoulder to shoulder, sharing walls, fortunes, and probably fleas. Privacy? A luxury as rare as lapis lazuli. The heart of this cramped world beats right in the courtyard. A simple, knee-high clay oven shaped like a beehive, its surface cracked and blackened by countless fires. Glowing embers breathe warmth into the space, casting dancing shadows on the walls. A woman kneels beside it, her hands coated in pale, sticky barley dough. She gives you a brief nod, her face lined but calm. No words needed. You're expected. The hearth, kinunu in Akkadian, isn't just for cooking. It's the furnace of life. It bakes bread, boils stew, dries fish, chases away chill, and under its watchful heat, families gather, stories are told, and gods are appeased with scraps. Historians still argue whether the smoke holes in these roofs were clever ventilation features or just happy accidents from shoddy thatching. Given the impressive lung capacity you're developing, breathing this air, maybe it was intentional cardio training. You crouch near the warmth, the heat welcome after the cooling evening air. The floor feels gritty under your palms, a mix of tracked-in dirt, crushed reed, and, is that a fish scale? Quirky tidbit. They'd sometimes mix crushed pottery shards right into the mud brick mortar for extra strength and insulation. Your Bronze Age Airbnb literally has yesterday's broken dinner plates holding up the walls. Talk about recycling goals. Look around. Storage jars line the walls, some taller than a child, sealed with clay stoppers and bitumen. One likely holds precious grain, another, lentils or dried figs. A smaller jar, high on a shelf, probably guards the household's tiny hoard of sesame oil or that coveted honey. Cooking tools are brutally simple. A heavy basalt grinding stone, mano and metate, if you want the fancy terms. A few blackened clay pots with rounded bottoms, designed to nestle perfectly into embers. A wooden paddle for the oven, and a flit knife sharp enough to slice through tough mutton or your thumb if you're careless. Forget stainless steel. This is the era of gritty chic. The woman slaps the dough onto the inner wall of the oven with a practiced thwack. A puff of fragrant steam and ash escapes. That's your cue. She gestures towards a coarse woven basket filled with grayish powder. Ash. Not just any ash. Carefully sifted tamarisk ash. You scoop a handful. It's finer than flour, cool, and surprisingly heavy. Mainstream fact incoming. Adding ash, an alkali, to dough wasn't just random grit. It significantly increased the bioavailability of nutrients like niacin in barley, preventing diseases like pellagra, a silent killer stalking grain-dependent cultures. You sprinkle it over the next lump of dough she hands you, working it in with your knuckles. The texture changes instantly, becoming slicker, more elastic. It's oddly satisfying. Helping mostly means not dropping it into the embers. The dog watches you intently, hoping you will. The smoke curls upwards, finding its escape route through the roof. Outside, the city sounds are muffled. Distant shouts, a baby crying, the rhythmic thump-thump of grain being pounded next door. Here, it's the crackle of the fire, the scrape of the kneading board, the soft cluck of the chicken. A child toddles in, clutching a small clay figurine, maybe a protective deity for the home. He stares at you with wide, dark eyes before burying his face in his mother's skirt. The simplicity is jarring. No fridge humming, no phone buzzing, just the elemental sounds of sustenance being wrestled from the earth and fire. That tang of fermenting grain, it's coming from a large, wide-mouthed jar near the wall. Beer mash. Tomorrow's project, perhaps. For now, the smell of baking bread begins to dominate. That deep, nutty, comforting scent of scorched barley and earth. It's the smell of safety, of survival, of home. The first loaf peels away from the oven wall, its underside patterned with the gritty texture of the clay and faintly speckled with ash. It's dense, dark brown, almost black in spots. Not Instagrammable, but real. The woman breaks off a small piece, blows on it, and offers it to the child. He gums it solemnly. No butter, no salt. Just grain, water, fire, and ash. The foundation of an empire, one gritty mouthful at a time. You feel the warmth seep into your bones, the simplicity settling around you like the settling smoke. The river bustles outside, the market shouts, but here by the hearth, with the scent of ash bread filling the air, you've found the quiet, smoky pulse of Bronze Age life. Honey awaits, but first, the bread must rise, or at least get pried off the oven wall. The warmth of the hearth still lingers on your palms as you slip back into the alley's dusty embrace. That dense, comforting smell of baking bread follows you like a promise, but it's quickly overtaken by a thicker, wood smoke-laden perfume pouring from a side lane. That's the scent of industry, the neighborhood's communal bakery. You follow your nose, the rhythmic thuds of dough hitting hot clay walls growing louder, punctuated by the raspy shouts of the bakers. Turning the corner, heat blasts your face. Before you stands the bakery proper, a larger open-fronted structure housing 3 massive, beehive-shaped clay ovens, each taller than a person. Their dome tops radiate waves of shimmering air. Men, stripped to loincloths and gleaming with sweat, move with urgent grace around the infernos. One shoves bundles of dried tamarisk wood and compressed dung cakes into a blazing maw. Another, wielding a long wooden paddle slick with water, scrapes out perfectly round, char-speckled loaves from the oven's inner wall. Thwack! A third baker slaps a new disc of dough onto the vacated spot. Steam hisses, ash puffs. It's a mesmerizing, brutally hot ballet. Mainstream fact: these communal bakeries were essential hubs. Most homes lacked ovens large or hot enough for efficient bread production, so families brought their kneaded dough here, paying a fee in grain or labor to have it transformed into life-sustaining loaves. Historians still argue whether bread itself sometimes was the currency. Baked loaves used to pay wages or settle small debts alongside barley grains. Imagine getting paid Friday in slightly warm, gritty flatbreads. Hope you like barley. You lean against a sun-warmed mud brick wall, momentarily sheltered from the oven's direct blast. The air tastes like scorched grain and ash. Fine gray powder settles on everything: the baker's shoulders, the stacked baskets of unleavened dough waiting their turn, even your eyelashes. This ash isn't just fallout, it's the baker's secret weapon. You watch a baker scoop a handful from a wide, shallow basin, yesterday's cooled, sifted oven ash. He sprinkles it liberally onto the smooth stone slab where the next batch of dough balls wait. Quirky tidbit: some bakeries might have used ash from specific woods or even burnt bones for different flavor profiles or perceived medicinal benefits. Think artisanal ash. Tonight, it's plain tamarisk. You see the logic. The ash prevents the sticky dough from adhering to the baker's hands and the hot oven wall. But it does more. As you saw in the home, that alkalinity works magic on the tough barley flour. It breaks down phytates, unlocking precious minerals like iron and zinc, making the bread not just filler, but actual nutrition. Without this gritty addition, malnutrition would stalk the city streets even more fiercely. That dense, dark loaf isn't just food, it's bioengineering, Bronze Age style. Forget your fancy sourdough starter. This is survival chemistry. A boy, maybe 10, rushes past you balancing a woven tray stacked high with fresh, steaming loaves on his head. The scent is intoxicating, deep, nutty, earthy. He heads towards the main street, likely to a vendor selling bread hot from the oven to passers-by. "Ninda!" you hear him shout. Bread, followed by a price in barley measures. A woman stops him, haggles briefly, and walks away clutching a worn loaf wrapped in a scrap of reed mat. Breakfast on the go, Bronze Age edition. You notice the loaves aren't uniform. Some are thicker, some thinner, some wider. It depended on the household's dough portion and the baker's hurried skill. Quality control? More like, did it stick? No? Good enough. You catch the eye of a baker taking a brief respite, swigging water from a clay cup. He gestures you closer, a weary but proud glint in his eyes. He points to the oven's roaring heart. "Kinu," he grunts. "Fire. The absolute master here. Too cool, the bread won't cook through. Too hot, it chars to an inedible cinder before the inside sets." They judge the heat by the color of the embers, the sound of the fire, the way the air shimmers. No thermometers, just generations of hard-won instinct baked into their bones like the ash in the bread. The heat is becoming oppressive, a physical weight. Sweat trickles down your temple. You step back slightly, observing the flow. Women arrive with baskets of their prepared dough. exchange brief words and perhaps a small clay token with the head baker, then leave. Others wait nearby, gossiping in the shade cast by a protruding roof, ready to collect their transformed loaves later. It's a system, efficient in its own smoky, chaotic way. You see a baker pull a particularly charred loaf from the wall. Instead of tossing it aside, he knocks off the worst of the black crust and sets it with the others. Every scrap counts, nothing wasted. That charred bit? Someone will soak it in weak beer or water to soften it into a gruel later. Hunger is a constant, unwelcome guest in most homes. The rhythmic thwack-scrape-thwack continues, a hypnotic percussion section to the city's symphony. A cloud of ash puffs into your face as a baker vigorously cleans his paddle. You cough, blinking grit from your eyes. It's in your hair, your nose, probably your lungs. This is the reality. Bread isn't soft, fluffy, or wrapped in plastic. It's dense, chewy, often slightly gritty with ash or stray bits of bran, tasting profoundly of the earth and fire that created it. It sustains armies, feeds laborers, comforts children, and fuels scribes, meticulously recording grain taxes on damp clay. It's the bedrock. And right now, watching these men wrestle dough and fire, smelling that elemental scent of scorched grain, you understand why bread was more than food here. It was life, shaped by hand, forged in ash, and pulled steaming from the sacred fire. The humble loaf held up an entire civilization, one gritty, char-speckled bite at a time. Time to move before you spontaneously combust. That tang of fermenting grain from the courtyard earlier, it's calling. Liquid sustenance awaits, the frothy golden haze of Mesopotamian beer. A shout comes from the back. Two workers are straining a finished batch. They tip a large jar slowly, pouring the murky liquid through a coarse reed mat stretched over another vessel. The thick sludge of spent grain and date pulp catches on the mat. The cloudy beer trickles through into the storage jar below. This is the bright beer, ready for consumption or further storage. The leftover sludge? Not wasted. It's scooped into baskets, likely fed to pigs, mixed into animal fodder, or even dried and used as fuel. Nothing is discarded. The filtered beer is still hazy, but drinkable with a straw. Some jars are sealed immediately with clay and bitumen for storage or transport. Others are left open for daily use. You see smaller jugs being filled for immediate delivery, perhaps to the palace kitchens or a nearby tavern. The air hums with activity, the splash of liquid, the scrape of paddles, the low conversation of workers covered in a fine dusting of grain and yeast. It's cooler here than the bakery, but the atmosphere is thick, damp, pregnant with the transformation of grain into gold. A worker takes a long draught straight from a jug using a simple reed straw, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. He offers you a weary smile. This is his workplace beverage, his lunch break, his sacred communion with Ninkasi. The hymn echoes in your mind. Ninkasi, you are the one who soaks the malt in a jar. You are the one who bakes the bapir in the big oven. You are the one who pours out the filtered beer of the collector vat. It's not just brewing, it's divine alchemy, a daily miracle in a clay jar. The sour-sweet scent clings to your clothes as you step back into the alley, leaving the liquid gold bubbling behind. Ahead, the cacophony of the market beckons. Time to find the spices that will transform that mutton stew from mere sustenance into something approaching Bronze Age luxury. The aroma of cumin and coriander is already teasing your nose, cutting through the yeasty fog. The heat of the bakery fades like a dream as you follow a deeper, earthier scent. Damp grain, sweet rot, and a faint, sour tang that prickles your nostrils. It leads you down a shaded alleyway, away from the oven's roar, towards a low, sprawling building whose walls seem to sweat moisture. The rhythmic slosh-slosh and low murmur of voices grows louder. Pushing aside a heavy reed mat hanging over the doorway, you step into the cool, dim interior of a brewery. Instantly, the smell intensifies, wrapping around you. Wet barley, overripe dates, and that unmistakable yeasty funk of fermentation. It's potent, alive. Mainstream fact, beer wasn't just a social lubricant here. It was a dietary staple, safer than dubious water, packed with calories and B vitamins. Workers received daily rations, up to 5 liters for strenuous labor. Think of it as liquid bread, the fuel that built ziggurats. Historians still argue whether Mesopotamians drank it for the buzz or purely as caloric necessity. Given the hymns dedicated to Ninkasi, the goddess of beer, praising its blissful heart, I suspect they enjoyed the side effects. Your eyes adjust. The space is cavernous, filled with large, wide-mouthed clay jars, pithoi, taller than you are, partially sunk into the packed earth floor. Their bulging bellies hold the magic. Near one, a brewer stands on a low stool, stirring a thick, bubbling slurry inside with a long wooden paddle. It looks like murky porridge. Chunks of darkened barley bread, vapor, float amidst a sea of soaked grain and mashed dates. "Dita," he grunts, seeing your interest. "Beer mash." The process is surprisingly sophisticated. First, barley is soaked, allowed to germinate slightly, malting, then dried, often over fire, which halts growth and adds a smoky note. Next, it's roughly ground. Some is baked into hard, shelf-stable loaves of bapir, essentially unleavened, twice-baked barley bread. This bapir and the coarsely ground malted barley are then mixed with water and date paste in these giant jars. Wild yeast, carried on the air or clinging to the date skins, does the rest, feasting on the sugars, creating alcohol and that distinctive fizz. Quirky tidbit: to filter out the thick sludge of grain husks and bread chunks when drinking, they used long reed straws, often decorated with lapis lazuli tips for the elite. Imagine sipping your morning cereal through a fancy blue stone straw. You're handed a smaller paddle. "Stir," the brewer commands, pointing into a freshly filled jar. The mash is surprisingly warm, the heat of fermentation. It's thick, resistant, clinging to the wood. You push down, feeling the gritty resistance of unmalted barley grains and chunks of bapir. Dates squish beneath the pressure, releasing their sticky sweetness. The smell rising is complex: sweet malt, caramelized date, sourdough tang, and that underlying barnyard funk. It's vigorous work. The yeast is busy, creating tiny bubbles that pop on the surface. The brewer nods approvingly. "Shikaru good," he says, using the Akkadian word for beer. He dips a small clay cup into a nearby jar, where an earlier batch has finished its primary ferment. The liquid he pours out is cloudy, the color of weak tea with a thick layer of sediment at the bottom. He hands it to you. No straw handy. You take a tentative sip. It's unexpected. Slightly sweet from the dates, tangy sour like a mild kombucha, with a distinct graininess and a low, earthy bitterness. The fizz is gentle, more a prickle on the tongue than a carbonated blast. And yes, there's warmth spreading down your throat. It's thin, refreshing, and strangely Moorish. Not your hoppy IPA, but for slaking thirst in 40-degree heat after hauling mud bricks. Perfect. You understand the daily ration instantly. It tastes like energy. The yeasty fog of the brewery clings to your tunic like a second skin as you push back into the furnace blast of late afternoon. Sunlight glares off pale mud brick walls. Instantly, a new wave of scents assaults you. An orchestra of aromas so potent it makes your eyes water. Cumin's earthy punch, coriander's citrusy zing, the warm, sweet bite of cinnamon, the sharp tang of dried onion flakes, and something deeply pungent, almost medicinal, asafoetida. Welcome to the spice souk. It's not a separate market, but a vibrant, chaotic corner of the main bazaar. A sensory explosion crammed between linen weavers and a coppersmith hammering out a rhythmic clang, clang, clang. Mainstream fact: Mesopotamia was a spice hub. Caravans from Anatolia brought saffron and licorice. Boats from Dilmun, modern Bahrain, carried cinnamon and cassia from further east, while Indus Valley traders offered black pepper and ginger. This dusty corner connects Ur to half the known world. Historians still argue whether organized merchant guilds controlled these lucrative routes or if it was a free-for-all of daring individual traders dodging bandits and sandstorms. Judging by the fierce haggling here, probably a bit of both. You weave through the crowd, dodging porters and donkeys. Spice vendors sit cross-legged on woven mats behind low tables piled with wonders. Some spices are whole, knobbly dried roots, twisted bark, dark brown seeds, wrinkled berries. Others are ground into vibrant powders, ochre yellow turmeric, rusty red sumac, deep green dried mint, displayed in shallow reed baskets. The air shimmers with floating dust motes, each particle carrying a burst of scent. Quirky tidbit: that intensely pungent, sulfurous smell? Likely silphium resin, imported from North Africa. Prized for flavor and medicine, it was also a notorious contraceptive. So prized, in fact, the Romans supposedly ate it to extinction. Hope they enjoyed their last spicy salad. A vendor holds up a tiny clay jar, uncorking it with a flourish under your nose. The aroma is complex, floral, hauntingly familiar. Saffron? He nods vigorously. Azupiranu! The crimson threads inside are worth their weight in silver. You see why. Harvesting those delicate crocus stigmas is backbreaking, dawn-picking work. Touché! A sharp voice demands beside you. A woman points accusingly at a small pile of coriander seeds a merchant is scooping into a folded palm leaf pouch for her. Her face is fierce, etched with the sharp lines of a life spent bargaining. The merchant scoffs, holding up 3 fingers. 3 shay, good quality, from the West. The dance begins. Her voice rises, sharp and insistent. His gestures become expansive, almost theatrical, praising his wares, insulting her offer. Onlookers pause, enjoying the free entertainment. She slaps a single additional barley grain onto the mat. 2.5 shay, final. The merchant throws his hands up, feigning outrage, but quickly scoops the grains and seals the deal with a grunt. Performance over. Transaction complete. Social bond reinforced. It's less about the half grain of barley and more about the ritual, the assertion of worth, the sheer, vital energy of the exchange. You remember the child with the toy sheep. The scale is different, but the dance is the same. Hope your handling skills are sharp. Dinner depends on it. You stop before a stall overflowing with fragrant greenery. Not spices, but fresh herbs. Bundles of pungent mint, sharp chives, feathery dill, and something resembling flat-leaf parsley are artfully arranged, their roots still damp. The vendor, an old woman with eyes like dark pebbles, smiles toothlessly and crushes a mint leaf, releasing its cool burst. "Sammy," she whispers, "medicine, flavor, life." She points to a pile of small, dried mushrooms. Kama, a wild foraged treasure, adding deep umami to stews. Beside them, a bowl holds pale, knobbly bulbs. Wild garlic? The sheer variety is staggering. This isn't just about exotic imports. It's about the local land, the marshes, the riverbanks, offering their own pungent gifts. A fly buzzes lazily over a basket of dried fish, ignored. But spice dust coats your throat, mingling with the ever-present market grit. You spot a familiar face, the woman from the mud-brick courtyard, clutching a small basket. She carefully counts out grains for a modest scoop of cumin and a few dried onion flakes. Tonight's stew just got an upgrade. Luxury measured in pinches. Suddenly, a commotion erupts nearby. A merchant selling expensive cassia bark, a cinnamon relative, accuses a boy of trying to snatch a piece. Voices rise, fingers jab. A city guard in a leather helmet and carrying a heavy spear pushes through the crowd. The boy, skinny and wide-eyed, protests his innocence. The guard roughly searches his ragged tunic, finding nothing but a few crumbs. He glares at the merchant, mutters something about wasting his time, and shoves the boy away. The boy melts into the throng. The merchant huffs, rearranging his precious bark. Tension crackles, then dissipates as quickly as it flared. Life in the souk is vibrant, demanding, often unfair. Danger, like spice dust, hangs in the air. Quirky callback. Remember that crocodile dung rumor? Some texts do mention it being used, but likely as an insect repellent for stored grain, not sunscreen. Phew, you catch a glimpse of a vendor displaying small dark cones. Date syrup? No. Palm sugar? Maybe. Then you see the delicate clay jars beside them, sealed with wax and bitumen. Honey. The real prize glints dully in the shade. But first, the spices. You take a deep breath of the chaotic, fragrant air. Cumin, anger, dust, life. And step towards the cinnamon merchant. Time to haggle like your stew depends on it. Because it does. That mutton won't spice itself, and the hearth fire back in the courtyard is waiting. The cinnamon merchant's indignant huffing fades behind you as you clutch your hard-won prize, a small, wax-sealed clay jar, cool and surprisingly heavy in your palm. Honey. The dense, golden scent seems to seep right through the clay, a rich counterpoint to the lingering spice dust and market sweat. This tiny vessel represents serious wealth, maybe half a day's wages for a laborer. You cradle it carefully, navigating the thinning market crowds as the sun dips lower, painting long, distorted shadows across the packed earth. Ahead, shaded by a dusty palm tree, sits a different kind of vendor. Not spices, but sweetness incarnate. The date seller. Mountains of sticky, wrinkled fruits, ranging from deep amber to almost black, fill woven baskets. The air here is thick, syrupy sweet, humming with lazy flies. Titu, a boy calls, waving a particularly plump specimen. Dates, the people's honey. Mainstream fact, date palms were the backbone of Mesopotamian horticulture. They provided shade, wood, fiber for ropes, and above all, this incredibly versatile fruit, eaten fresh, dried, pressed into cakes, fermented into wine, or boiled down into thick, molasses-like syrup. A single tree could feed a family for months. Historians still argue whether the famed Hanging Gardens might have featured elaborate date palm terraces irrigated by screw pumps. Imagine tiered sweetness shimmering above Babylon. You pause, drawn by the rhythmic thump, thump, thump coming from beside the date stall. An old man, his back bent, works tirelessly. He feeds dried dates into a large, worn stone mortar. With a heavy wooden pestle, he pounds them relentlessly. Thump, thump, thump. Sweat glistens on his brow. The dates slowly surrender, collapsing into a thick, sticky, dark brown paste that clings stubbornly to the pestle. Dibs titu, he mutters, seeing your gaze. Date paste, its grueling work, transforming tough, fibrous fruit into edible sweetness. This paste is the everyday sweetener, the poor man's honey, stirred into porridge, stuffed into bread, or eaten by the sticky fingerful. It lacks the floral complexity of honey, offering instead a deep, caramelized, almost smoky sweetness. Quirky tidbit, that date palm fiber, they didn't just make rope. Evidence suggests it was sometimes used as a primitive toothbrush. Chew the end to fray it, then scrub. Minty fresh? Unlikely. Sticky? Definitely. But hey, better than crocodile dung breath freshener? Probably. The honey vendor, a wiry man with shrewd eyes, notices your jar and gestures you over. He's surrounded by stacks of similar small jars and larger amphorae sealed with bitumen-blackened stoppers. He takes your jar, carefully breaks the wax seal with a thumbnail, and dips a thin wooden spatula inside. He pulls it out, holding it aloft. Thick, viscous gold drips slowly, languidly, catching the late sun like liquid amber. The strands stretch impossibly long before finally snapping. He nods approvingly. Danu, he says, strong, good, quality matters. Wild honey, gathered from hives in riverbank cliffs or marshes, varied wildly, light and floral from acacia, dark and robust from cedar trees, sometimes even carrying hints of the spices blooming near the hives. Beekeepers, brave souls tending hives in cylindrical terracotta tubes, were vital, their craft passed down through generations. Honey wasn't just food. It was medicine, smeared on wounds to prevent infection. It actually works, somewhat, mixed with herbs for coughs, and a key offering to soothe the gods. A drop of this gold could transform bitter medicine or elevate a simple cheese. The vendor reseals your jar meticulously with fresh wax, pressing his seal, a crude bee design, into it. Possession secured. You watch the date paste maker scoop a generous dollop of his dark, sticky product onto a shard of broken pottery. He offers it. It's incredibly dense, chewy, intensely sweet with a slight raisiny bitterness from the skins. Energy incarnate. Beside him, another worker pours a jar of thinner, paler liquid, date syrup, dibs, into smaller clay bottles. This syrup, boiled down from pressed dates, was the versatile sweetener, the glaze for roasted meats, the base for fermented date wine, titu kuranu, and a cheaper alternative to honey in cooking. The contrast is stark. The rare, complex luxury of honey versus the abundant, earthy sweetness of the date. One for the elite or the gods, the other for the masses. Yet both are alchemy, transforming the gifts of sun and soil into concentrated delight. You tuck your precious honey jar securely into a fold of your tunic, feeling its weight. A tiny piece of captured sunshine. Suddenly, a commotion distracts the honey vendor. A palace servant in a cleaner, finer tunic approaches, trailed by a guard. The servant gestures imperiously towards the largest amphora. Royal household business. The vendor's demeanor shifts instantly from weary merchant to obsequious supplier. Nods, bows, hasty unpacking. The servant dips a finger into an opened amphora, tastes the honey critically, then barks an order. 2 amphorae are set aside. The guard watches impassively. Taxes paid, temple offerings, a royal craving for honeyed figs. The transaction is swift, devoid of the market's theatrical haggling. Power speaks. Sweetness is procured. Historians still argue whether honey's primary value in elite circles was culinary or purely symbolic, a direct link to the divine sweetness of the gods. Watching the servant depart with his golden burden, flanked by the guard, it feels like both. Power needs its symbols, and symbols taste delicious. The thump, thump, thump of the date mortar resumes, a steady counterpoint to the departing clink of the palace amphorae. The old man wipes his brow, takes a swig of water from a skin bag, and feeds more wrinkled fruits into the stone basin. Life continues. You turn away from the sweetness stalls, your honey secured. The scent of wood smoke and roasting meat is stronger now, mingling with the syrupy air. Time moves towards evening. Your borrowed courtyard home awaits, with its simple hearth, the barley bread cooling, the lentils soaking, and the chunk of mutton, a rare luxury, ready to be transformed. That honey isn't for tonight's stew. That's cumin and onion territory. No, this gold is for something special. Perhaps a drizzle over fresh cheese? A dip for the gritty bread, a tiny offering poured onto the hearthstones for the household gods. The weight of the jar against your side is a promise of sweetness to come, a tiny piece of the sun's generosity held close in the gathering dusk. The sharp tang of onions being chopped nearby cuts through the sweetness, a reminder of the savory reality waiting. Time to trade the market's sticky gold for the smoky warmth of the hearth fire and the sizzle of mutton meeting hot clay. The alchemy of ash and honey continues. The syrupy sweetness of the date stall clings to the back of your throat as you weave through the twilight market, the precious honey jar a comforting weight against your hip. The chaotic energy is shifting, softening. Vendors begin packing wares into baskets and sacks. Porters hoist final loads onto groaning donkeys. The sharp tang of cumin and cinnamon is now overlaid with the richer, deeper perfume of meat hitting heat. You follow it like a bloodhound, dodging a man rolling up his reed mat, past a coppersmith dousing his forge. Ahead, near the butcher's quarter, an area noticeably smellier and slicker underfoot, a small crowd has gathered around a glowing brazier. Flames lick upwards, illuminating faces eager for the day's rare luxury. Tonight's star attraction, mutton stew. Mainstream fact, meat was not an everyday affair for most Mesopotamians. Sheep and goats were primarily valued for wool, milk, and dung fuel. Eating them was reserved for festivals, sacrifices, or the wealthy. That chunk in your borrowed courtyard pot? A significant investment, likely from an old ewe past her milking prime. Historians still argue whether mutton or goat was preferred. Tonight, it's mutton. Tough luck, Nanny. You reach the courtyard just as the coals in the simple hearth glow a fierce orange red. The woman is already at work. On a worn grinding stone, she crushes your hard-won cumin seeds and dried onion flakes into a coarse powder. Crunch, scrape. Crunch, scrape. The pungent aroma cuts through the wood smoke, sharp and promising. She glances at your honey jar, gives a brief approving nod, and gestures towards a sturdy blackened pot nestled deep in the embers. Inside, chunks of fatty mutton, bone-in, of course, for flavor, sizzle and spit in a tiny pool of precious sesame oil. The sound is visceral, primal. Sssss. Fat renders browning the meat, filling the small space with a rich, gamey scent that makes your stomach clench, despite the earlier bread. Quirky tidbit. They likely used all the fat rendered here, save to grease tools, condition leather, or even as a primitive skin balm against the harsh sun and wind. Waste not, want not, especially when it comes to precious calories. Kakadu, the woman mutters, pointing to a small pile of chopped, pale green bulbs beside her. Onions, lots of them. You grab the flint knife, handle smooth with use, edge surprisingly keen, and start chopping. Tears well instantly. Ancient onions pack a punch. The rhythmic thok, thok, thok joins the hiss-crackle of the meat and the distant thump of grain being pounded next door. It's the Bronze Age kitchen symphony. You scrape the pungent pile into the pot. A furious sizzle erupts, steam billowing, carrying the sharp, sweet sting of cooking onion straight into your nostrils. She adds a handful of lentils scooped from a storage jar, then a pinch of salt from a grubby linen pouch, grayish, coarse, likely evaporated from marsh flats. Finally, the crushed cumin and onion powder. The air thickens, complex and mouth-watering. Rendered mutton fat, caramelizing onions, earthy lentils, and the warm, slightly citrusy depth of cumin. Water follows, poured from a coarse clay jug, strained canal water, hopefully. It hits the hot pot with a loud whoosh, sending up a massive cloud of fragrant steam that momentarily obscures the hearth. The furious sizzle subsides into a contented burble. The transformation begins. You settle back on your haunches, the flint knife resting on your knee. The dog inches closer, nose twitching furiously, fixated on the pot. The woman ignores him, stirring the stew with a long wooden spoon. The broth is already clouding, turning a rich, muddy brown. She tosses in a few dried mint leaves, sammy, a precious wild garlic clove salvaged from the market forage. Maybe a dried wild mushroom, if you were lucky. The scent deepens, gaining herbal notes and underlying earthiness. It's not fine dining, it's survival alchemy. Tough meat, humble pulses, water and fire, elevated by a few pinches of traded spice and foraged treasure. Historians still argue whether Mesopotamian stews were thick, porridge-like affairs or thinner broths. Tonight, it looks like it's heading towards thick. Sticks to the ribs better. You remember the grit in the bread, the tang of the beer. This stew will be dense, fibrous, demanding jaw work. Flavor? Salty, meaty, earthy, with cumin's warmth cutting through. Subtlety isn't the goal, sustenance is. The burbling grows louder, steadier. Fat globules shimmer on the surface. The smell is intoxicating, weaving through the courtyard smoke, promising comfort in a world where comfort is hard-won. The noise level outside drops noticeably. The market's roar fades to distant shouts, the clatter of closing stalls. Stars begin pricking through the gaps in the palm-frond roof. Inside the courtyard, it's warm, smoky, filled with the hypnotic sound of bubbling stew and the soft crackle of embers. The woman covers the pot loosely with a large, flat sherd of broken pottery. The simmer slows, becomes a low, contented rumble. Time works its magic now, breaking down tough sinew, softening lentils, melding flavors. It'll simmer for hours, maybe all night on banked coals. The wait is part of the ritual, the anticipation building with the deepening aromas. A child, lured by the smell, peeks from a doorway, eyes wide. The woman breaks off a small piece of the dense ash bread, dips it carefully into the simmering broth, blows on it, and hands it over. The child sucks on it solemnly, eyes closing in bliss. A preview. The dog whines softly. Even the chicken seems to pause its pecking, tilting its head towards the hearth. You feel the warmth seep into your bones, the fatigue of navigating Ur's chaos settling over you like a blanket. The simple act of tending the pot, watching ingredients transform, feels grounding, sacred almost. This smoky, savory alchemy, born of ash and fire and precious spice, is the heartbeat of the home. It's not just dinner, it's resilience simmering in a clay pot. The honey jar waits patiently in the shadows. Sweetness comes later. For now, the savory, bubbling promise of mutton stew holds the twilight courtyard in its fragrant, steamy embrace. The night deepens, the stars brighten, and the pot murmurs its slow, ancient song. The deep, savory murmur of the stew pot is your lullaby, a comforting counterpoint to the distant yips of street dogs and the soft rustle of palm fronds overhead. You drift into a sleep thick with the scent of cumin and caramelized onions, only to be jolted awake what feels like moments later. Not by noise, but by silence. The pre-dawn air is cool, still, and heavy with dew. The hearth embers glow faintly, a dull, red eye watching the courtyard. Above, the sky is a deep indigo, pricked with fading stars. And then you hear it, a plaintive, throaty baa from the alley, followed by another and another. It's time for milk. You stumble blearily into the cool gloom. The woman is already there, untying a scruffy brown goat from a tethering post near the door. Her kids, the human ones, trail behind, rubbing sleep from their eyes. The goat stamps a hoof, shaking its head, bells clanking softly. "Labanu," the woman says simply, patting the goat's flank. Milk. The day's first alchemy begins. Mainstream fact, goats and sheep were Mesopotamia's dairy lifeline. Cows existed, but were rare and valuable, primarily for plowing. Goats thrived in the harsh climate, offering milk, meat, hair for rough cloth, and dung fuel. Their milk was easier to digest than cow's milk for many, thanks to different proteins. Historians still argue whether widespread lactose intolerance shaped their dairy practices, favoring fermented products like cheese and yogurt over fresh milk. Judging by the tang awaiting you, they were masters of transformation. The woman crouches beside the goat, a simple clay bowl held firmly between her knees. Her hands move with practiced efficiency. A quick wipe of the udder with a damp rag, then rhythmic squeezing. Squirt, squirt, squirt. The sound is sharp, percussive in the stillness. Warm, frothy white milk streams into the bowl, filling the air with a sweet, grassy, slightly gamey scent. It's richer, stronger smelling than supermarket cow's milk. You're handed another bowl. Time to learn. Goat udders are surprisingly small, firm. Finding the rhythm is tricky. Your first squeeze produces a weak dribble onto your sandal. The goat flicks an ear, unimpressed. The child watching giggles. You adjust, focusing. Squirt! Success! A thin stream hits the bowl. It's warm, almost hot against your fingers. The scent is primal, earthy. Quirky tidbit: keep goats calm during milking. Some herders might sing or play simple reed flutes. Others, less musically inclined, just bribe them with handfuls of fragrant alfalfa or chickweed plucked at dawn. Tonight, it's quiet concentration and the occasional grunt from the goat. Soon, 2 bowls brim with warm, foamy milk. The goat, relieved, is led away to nibble on discarded vegetable tops. Back in the smoky warmth of the courtyard, the real magic begins. The woman pours the fresh milk into a wide, shallow clay dish, setting it near the hearth's fading warmth, not directly on the embers. Fresh milk spoils fast in the Mesopotamian heat. Fermentation is key. Wild bacteria and yeasts, ever present in the air, on the bowls, on hands, will work quickly. By evening, this could be tangy yogurt, laban, but today's goal is cheese. She takes a small, porous clay vessel from a shelf, a strainer. It looks like a fat, unglazed flower pot. Into it, she tips about half the fresh milk. Then she reaches for a small, stoppered jar and extracts a thumb-sized lump of something pale and rubbery. Imhuru, she murmurs. Rennet, the key coagulant. Mainstream fact: Mesopotamians sourced rennet from the stomach linings of suckling kids or lambs, where natural enzymes curdle mother's milk. This precious lump, dried and stored, could curdle vast quantities. She crumbles a tiny piece into the milk in the strainer, gives it a quick stir with her finger, and sets it aside on a woven reed mat. The remaining milk in the shallow dish is left uncovered near the hearth. You watch as the woman retrieves yesterday's straining vessel. She carefully lifts it. Inside, the milk has transformed. It's no longer liquid, but a semi-solid mass, the curds, swimming in a thin, yellowish liquid, whey. It smells tangy, clean, like sour cream. She gently presses the curds with the back of a wooden spoon, encouraging more whey to weep out through the porous clay. The whey drips steadily into a bowl beneath. Nothing wasted. The whey? Nutritious drink for kids, human or goat, base for soups, or even used in tanning leather. The pressed curds left in the strainer are yesterday's cheese, soft, crumbly, snow-white, and smelling intensely fresh and sour. She scoops a tiny bit onto a shard of yesterday's bread and offers it. You hesitate, then try it. The texture is like dense ricotta, cool and moist. The taste? Bright, lactic tang, clean and refreshing, with a faint grassy note from the goat's diet. It's simple, elemental, delicious. A sprinkle of salt would elevate it, but this is pure, unadorned dairy sunshine. Historians still argue whether they flavored fresh cheese with herbs like dill or caraway, or saved those precious additions for elite tables. Tonight, it's pure tang. Your gaze drifts back to the fresh milk setting near the hearth. Already, a slight skin might be forming on the surface, exposed to the warm air. The rennet in the other portion is silently working its invisible magic, knitting proteins together. It's a slower, gentler alchemy than the fire-forged bread or the bubbling beer, but no less vital. This daily ritual, wrestling goats at dawn, capturing warm milk, harnessing invisible forces to transform it, speaks of profound understanding. The woman covers the shallow dish of milk, destined for yogurt, with a clean reed mat. The rennet-infused milk in the strainer sits patiently. Later, she might hang that curd in a cloth to drain further, creating a firmer cheese, or salt it lightly, or eat it fresh, like now, drizzled with a drop of that precious honey you secured. The sharp tang meeting the deep floral gold. That's a taste worthy of the dawn. The first rays of true sunlight now slice through the roof gaps, catching the dust motes dancing above the cooling hearth and the simple, profound bowls of white. Milk transforming, curds resting, cheese waiting. The city outside is still mostly asleep, but in this smoky courtyard, the day's first sustenance is already captured, curdling gently in the pale light. The dog sniffs hopefully at the whey bowl. The promise of ash and honey continues, one slow, lactic transformation at a time. The tang of fresh cheese still lingers on your tongue, bright and clean, as you slip out of the courtyard into the cool gray-blue stillness of pre-dawn Ur. The city holds its breath. Palm fronds hang motionless. The only sounds are your own soft footsteps on the packed earth and the distant, rhythmic slap-slap of water against the canal banks. That and the low murmur of voices drifting from the direction of the Euphrates. You follow the sound, the air growing damper, heavier with the scent of wet mud, decaying reeds, and something alive and fishy. Dawn is the river's hour. Mainstream fact, the Euphrates and its canals teemed with life. Carp, catfish, barbel, mussels, and even turtles. Fish wasn't just a supplement. It was a vital, relatively affordable source of protein for people living far from the pastures. Historians still argue whether complex fishing rights or seasonal bans existed to prevent overfishing, or if it was a chaotic free-for-all. Given the organized chaos of the market, probably chaotic. You reach the main quay as the first sliver of sun bleeds orange across the eastern sky, turning the sluggish brown water to molten copper. Boats are already out. Slender reed quaffas coated in bitumen for waterproofing, and larger wooden craft with upturned prows. Fishermen stand silhouetted against the dawn, casting weighted nets, shashatu, in wide, shimmering circles. Splash. The nets sink, then are hauled back hand over hand, muscles straining against the water's drag and the promise of weight. Nunu. A cry rings out as a net emerges, glistening and writhing. A tangle of silvery scales, flashing tails, and gaping mouths. Catfish, thick-bodied and whiskered. Barbel with downturned mouths. Sleek carp fighting the mesh. Quirky tidbit. Some fishermen use tame otters to help herd fish into their nets. Imagine sleek, whiskered partners darting through the murky water. Less quirky? They also used baited lines with bone or bronze hooks, and even wicker traps woven like baskets, set in reed beds overnight. Clever humans. Ashore, the processing begins immediately. On the muddy bank, women and older children kneel, their knives flashing in the new light. Scritch-scratch. Scales fly. Schlick. Heads come off. Rip. Guts are pulled and tossed into a growing pile where hopeful gulls squabble. The efficiency is breathtaking. Hands move with practiced speed, transforming wriggling life into glistening fillets and whole, gutted bodies. The air fills with the metallic tang of blood and the deeper, briny smell of innards. Flies materialize instantly, a buzzing cloud. Nothing is wasted. The offal attracts birds. Fish heads and bones might be boiled for broth later. Even the scales? Sometimes used for a crude, shimmering decorative effect on pottery or cheap jewelry. Think Bronze Age glitter. You're handed a flint knife and a slippery, still twitching carp. "Help!" a woman grunts, not looking up from her own rapidly diminishing pile. No gloves. Your fingers sink into cool, slick scales. The fish's gills pulse weakly. It's visceral, immediate. You mimic her motions. Scrape off the scales. They fly everywhere, sticking to your tunic. Slice behind the gills, wrench the head off. Surprisingly tough. Slit the belly. Pull out the coiled, glistening guts. The smell is intense, fresh, cold, and profoundly of the river. Your hands are quickly coated in silvery slime and blood. The dog from the courtyard would be in heaven here. But not all the catch is destined for immediate cooking. Preservation is key. You see some fish simply laid out on woven reed mats to dry in the strengthening sun, a risky method in the fly-filled heat. More reliable methods are underway. Near a smoky fire, racks hold split fish, their flesh pale and open, slowly turning translucent and leathery in the heat and smoke. "Kupu," a man says, pointing to the smoking rack. Smoked fish. The wood used, tamarisk, perhaps acacia, imparts flavor, while the smoke and heat drive out moisture, creating a shelf-stable, protein-rich food. Salt is the other magic. A precious commodity, but vital here. You see workers layering gutted fish in large, wide-mouthed jars, alternating with coarse gray crystals of marsh salt. Tabtu, salt. They pack the fish tightly, pressing down, then seal the jar mouth with wet clay. Brine will form, drawing out moisture and creating an environment hostile to spoilage bacteria. Pickled fish. It would taste intensely salty, fishy, perhaps slightly funky, but it would last months, even years. Mainstream fact, salted and smoked fish wasn't just local food. It was a valuable trade good, shipped upriver or overland to regions less blessed by the Euphrates. Imagine a jar of pickled Babylonian catfish ending up on a Hittite merchant's table. A shout draws your attention downstream. A larger boat returns, laden not just with fish, but with reeds, thick green stalks taller than a person. These reeds are another river gift. They'll be dried and woven into mats, baskets, roofing, even the frames for the ubiquitous quaffa boats. True river-to-roof sustainability. You watch fishermen mend nets in the shade, their fingers flying, weaving new cords from twisted flax or palm fiber. Nets were valuable, constantly needing repair after encounters with thrashing fish or snags on the muddy bottom. The rhythm of the river life settles around you. The slap of water, the scrape of knives, the murmur of voices, the cries of gulls, the hiss of fish hitting hot, smoking racks. A boy delivers a basket of fresh, gleaming fish fillets to a waiting trader. Payment exchanged in copper rings. Breakfast for the city's elite, perhaps. You rinse your slimy, fish-scented hands in the canal's edge, the water cool and brown. The metallic tang of blood mixes with the muddy river scent. Historians still argue whether fish was considered poor man's food or a respected staple for all. Watching the skilled hands, the careful preservation, the vital trade, it feels essential. The river gives, and takes with gratitude and sharp knives. The sun climbs higher, warming your back, promising another scorching day. The smell of smoke and drying fish follows you as you turn away from the water, back towards the warren of streets. That mutton stew simmered all night. It's time for breakfast. But first, a detour past the tiny kitchen garden, clinging to life behind the mud brick walls. Even in the heart of the city, green things grow. The fishy tang still clings to your hands as you duck back into the courtyard's smoky embrace. But a brighter scent cuts through. The deep, savory perfume of mutton stew simmered overnight. The woman lifts the pottery lid. A cloud of aromatic steam billows, carrying 12 hours of cumin, onion, and tenderized meat. A kalu, she murmurs. Eat, but first, green things. In the corner, where a sliver of dawn light slices through the palm roof, lies the household's pride, a kitchen garden no larger than a bath mat. This sliver of earth, crammed between a grinding stone and a chicken coop, is Ur's answer to urban farming. Mainstream fact, even in dense cities, Mesopotamians grew essentials like onions, leeks, garlic, cucumbers, and herbs in courtyard plots or rooftop containers. Their secret? Companion planting, leeks beside cucumbers to deter beetles, mint near lentils to repel mice. It's Bronze Age permaculture in miniature. Historians still argue whether these micro-gardens produced meaningful calories or were just flavor supplements. Judging by the woman's reverence as she kneels here, every leaf counts. You crouch beside her, the packed earth cool and crumbly under your fingers. She hands you a cracked clay cup. Time to water. You dip it into a large storage jar filled with murky canal water, gritty with silt, smelling faintly of algae and wet earth. As you drizzle it over the soil, the plants sigh audibly. Well, not really. But the mint, Sammy, perks up, releasing its cool, piercing scent as droplets hit its leaves. Beside it, spiky green shoots of young onions stab upward, defiant in the gloom. A single cucumber vine snakes along a reed trellis, its yellow flower promising summer fruit. Quirky tidbit. To fend off pests, some gardeners crushed crickets into a paste and smeared it on leaves, a primitive pesticide. Imagine the smell. Fresh mint with undertones of bug guts. Still better than crocodile dung, but let's hope they washed their hands before milking goats. The woman plucks a fat green leaf, chickweed, and crushes it under your nose. Sharp, grassy, alive. Ashu, she says, wild, foraged. Beyond this tiny plot, the marshes and riverbanks offered a pantry. Pungent wild garlic, tart purslane, bitter dandelion greens, and those earthy mushrooms, camus, you saw in the market. Gathering them meant dodging snakes and irritable water buffalo, but the reward was free flavor. You spot a cluster of feathery fronds, dill, and brush it lightly. The scent bursts forth, citrusy, clean, like sunshine bottled. Perfect for cutting through stew's richness. Historians still argue whether rooftop gardens were common or just elite luxuries. Mud brick roofs couldn't handle heavy soil, so most stuck to courtyards. But imagine a noble's terrace shimmering with basil and saffron crocuses, Mesopotamia's version of a penthouse herb garden. A rustle in the corner. The chicken has escaped its coop and pecks greedily at a young leek shoot. The woman shoos it away with a hiss. Lisu, scram! The bird retreats, indignant. You rescue the leek, its base white and sturdy. Companion planting joke? More like companion panic. Bronze Age tinder. Onion swipes right on cucumber for mutual pest protection. The dog noses your elbow, hoping for fish guts, but gets a mint stem instead. He sneezes. Tough crowd. You harvest sparingly. A few mint leaves, a sprig of dill, 2 young onions. Every pluck feels sacred. This tiny oasis battles dust, shade, and chicken raids to offer freshness. The woman tucks the greens into a fold of her tunic, their vitality stark against the dusty courtyard. That honey you traded? It'll wait. These herbs are today's alchemy. As you rise, your knee cracks like a grinding stone. The woman smirks, handing you a clay scoop. Time to fertilize. She nods at a woven basket holding dried goat dung pellets, odorless, crumbly. You sprinkle them around the plants, the ultimate recycling. Waste, nourishing life. It's poetic, if you ignore the origin. Suddenly, a glint near the cucumber vine. A tiny clay bee figurine, half buried. A votive offering? Or a child's lost toy? Quirky callback. Remember the apiaries in the marshes? Bees loved these gardens too, drawn to mint flowers. One might have buzzed straight into your stew pot if the dog hadn't snapped at it last week. The woman pats the soil, satisfied. This patch feeds 5 mouths. No pressure, little leak. Sunlight now floods the courtyard, igniting dust motes into gold. The stew pot burbles, demanding its herbal tribute. You chop the onions and mint, the knife releasing their juices. Pungent, green, hopeful. The dill follows, its fragrance a bright counterpoint to the stew's deep umami. As you stir them in, the broth transforms, earthy richness lifted by herbal lightness. The woman breaks ash bread into bowls. Breakfast is served. You eat crouched by the hearth, the stew thick with lentils and mutton, the herbs a vibrant whisper of the wild marshes beyond Ur's walls. It's gritty, fibrous, and profoundly satisfying. The dog gets the leek tops. The chicken eyes the garden again. Life, stubborn and green, persists. Even here, in a sun-baked city of mud, ash, and honey, a handful of dirt can birth sweetness. The last spoonful of stew, bright with dill and earthy lentils, warms your belly as you set the gritty clay bowl aside. Sunlight now streams into the courtyard, turning dust motes into swirling gold. The woman gestures toward the hearth's cooling embers, then to the blackened pot resting within them. Time for cleanup. You lift it carefully. The rounded base, scorched and ash-streaked, fits perfectly against your palm. This humble vessel is a marvel of Bronze Age engineering. Unglazed, porous, thick-walled, it's endured decades of direct flame, boiling water, and acidic beer mash without shattering. Mainstream fact: these pots weren't thrown on a wheel, but coil-built, ropes of clay hand-rolled and stacked, then smoothed inside and out, firing in open pits at low temperatures, just 600 to 800 degrees Celsius, left them fragile yet resilient, designed to nestle snugly into embers. Historians still argue whether their rounded bottoms evolved for stability in hearths or simply because nobody invented flat tables yet. Tonight, it's a triumph of function over form. You scrape burnt stew residue with a wooden paddle. The charred bits cling stubbornly. Nakasu, the woman says, handing you a handful of coarse sand and a dried gourd sponge. Time to scour. You sprinkle sand into the pot, add a splash of gritty canal water, and swirl. The abrasive paste grinds against the clay, releasing flecks of carbonized mutton and cumin. It's satisfyingly primal. Bronze Age Brillo pad. Quirky tidbit: some pots show traces of bitumen lining, likely repairs for hairline cracks. Imagine sealing your favorite Dutch oven with asphalt. Stickiness guaranteed. The dog licks a stray splatter of sand sludge off the floor. Gourmet! Beside the hearth lies the toolkit of survival. A basalt grinding stone, worn concave from centuries of grain meeting granite. The mano, handstone, rests atop it, heavy as a dumbbell. You test its weight. This is Mesopotamian CrossFit. Crushing barley here built biceps and bread. Nearby, a flint knife, its edge still keen despite chipping. No stainless steel. Resharpening meant expert napping under a palm tree. Lose this, the woman warns, and dinner is raw. Joke. Bronze Age Amazon delivery? A kid sprinting with a replacement blade, paid in fig paste. Fuel dominates the corner. Stacked tamarisk branches, brittle and aromatic, beside neat pyramids of dung cakes. Zebu, she says, tapping a dried disc. Poop power. Donkey, goat, even cow dung, mixed with straw, sun-dried, burned slow and hot. Efficient, renewable, and free if you ignored the sourcing process. Mainstream fact, fuel scarcity shaped everything. Wood was precious, imported from distant mountains, so dung cakes fueled homes, bakeries, and metal workshops. Forget reduce your carbon footprint. Ur's eco-warriors optimized their dung output. You arrange a few cakes like poker chips. High stakes, burn too fast, and the stew stays cold. Now, the pièce de résistance, a ceramic oven the size of a watermelon, perforated with fist-sized holes. Not for baking, it's a portable heat diffuser. Place it over coals, set a pot atop it, and voila! Indirect heat for slow simmering. Bronze Age slow cooker insert. Historians still argue whether these were also used to roast barley for beer, bapir bread, or warm cold feet during floods. You peer inside. Ancient scorch marks spiral like constellations. Quirky callback. Remember the bitumen repairs? One shard here oozes a tar-black smear. DIY spirit, strong. Suddenly, a clang from next door, copper being worked. It sparks an idea. You point to a small bronze hook hanging near drying herbs. Sikatu, the woman nods, for suspending pots over flame when embers grew low. Adjustable height meant adjustable temperature. No dials, just calloused fingers judging heat by cheek sweat and steam hiss. Precision engineering? More like, ouch, that's hot, intuition. You mimic lowering a pot, eyebrows singeing. She smirks, pantomiming a tragic stew spill. Comedy gold, the chicken struts past, eyeing the dung cakes. Lisu, you both shout. It flees, squawking. Teamwork. You stack the scrubbed pot with others. Lidded jars for grain, narrow-necked amphorae for oil, wide-mouthed pithoi for beer fermenting. Each shape tells a story: storage, transport, transformation. That honey you traded? Secured in a tiny, wax-sealed jug designed to deter ants and sticky-fingered kids. Efficiency ruled. Lids doubled as plates. Broken shards became scrapers, toys, or voting tokens. Kidding about the voting. Probably. As you wipe grit from your hands, the woman lifts a palm-sized clay disc from a niche. It's incised with cuneiform. A recipe? A prayer? Niditu, she murmurs. Dedication. To Nisaba, goddess of grain, or just a grocery list. Historians still argue whether domestic kitchens used writing or relied on oral tradition. This disc feels sacred, a tiny manifesto against hunger. You place it back gently beside a dried fig offering. The tools surround you. Grinding stone, flint knife, dung cakes, perforated oven. Simple, brilliant, unchanged for millennia. No touch screens, just touch fire. The hearth's last ember winks out. Technology, style. Keep the stew hot, the beer bubbling, and the honey sealed. Everything else is commentary. The smoky intimacy of the courtyard kitchen vanishes as you're swept into a tide of purposeful chaos. Sunlight glares off towering whitewashed walls. The air vibrates with a new intensity. Not wood smoke and herbs, but the roar of massive ovens, the clang of bronze cauldrons, and the sharp tang of scale. You've entered the palace kitchens. Forget one hearth. Here, 20 fires blaze under vaulted ceilings tall enough to swallow your mud brick home whole. Mainstream fact? The Palace of Ur's ruler consumed up to 500 daily grain rations, enough to feed a small village. This wasn't cooking, it was logistics warfare. Historians still argue whether these feasts reinforced political loyalty or were pure displays of godlike power. Judging by the sweating scribe frantically tallying amphorae of oil, it was both. You're jostled by a porter, staggering under a dripping side of beef, a beast that fed 10 families for a week. "Shulam," a foreman barks. "Hurry!" The scale is staggering. Cauldrons large enough to bathe in simmer with lamb stew enriched with dates, honey, and your market cumin, but in quantities that would make the courtyard woman weep. Quirky tidbit. Palace menus sometimes included stuffed river birds, ducks force-fed figs and fattened in reed pens. Think Bronze Age foie gras, minus the ethical debate, or maybe not. A cook plunges his arm into a vat of rising dough, kneading with his whole body. The ash here isn't gritty tamarisk, it's imported cedar, burned to a fine white powder for elite bread. Politics simmers louder than the stews. Near the grain stores, a sharp-eyed scribe in a clean-fringed robe taps his clay tablet. "One gur, shebalu engar," he dictates to an assistant. 1 gur measure grain ration for the plowman. Every seed, every drop of oil, every honey jar is recorded, taxed, allocated. Miss a tally? Hope your God likes you. This is where the harvest's bounty transforms into control. The temple tithe, first fruits, finest lambs, purest honey, awaits in sealed storerooms nearby. Nidittu, the scribe murmurs, touching a clay tag. Offering. Power isn't just eaten, it's meticulously measured and offered upwards. You dodge a boy carrying a basket of speckled quail eggs, delicate appetizers for tonight's banquet. Nearby, a sweating man turns a whole gazelle on a spit over a fire pit, basting it with date syrup and precious sesame oil. The scent is dizzying. Caramelized meat, fat dripping onto coals. Exotic spices, cinnamon, saffron, whispering from a mortar. This isn't sustenance, it's theater. A cook grinds pistachios with a heavy stone, their rich green oil staining the mortar. "Lu tabtu," he shouts. "Make it sweet." Honey again, gallons of it, glazing roasted figs, thickening nut cakes, drowning fresh cheese. The honey you traded for is a raindrop in this golden flood. Suddenly, tension crackles. A steward in a leopard skin apron sniffs a pot of simmering fish stew, his face darkening. "Manu Epshu, who cooked this?" Silence falls. A young apprentice trembles. The steward dips a reed spoon, tastes, spits. "La tabu, not good. Not enough asafoetida? Spoiled fish." The apprentice is cuffed sharply on the ear. "Shana epush, make it again." Waste is unthinkable, yet perfection is demanded. Failure could mean flogging, or worse. Reassignment to digging irrigation ditches. Joke, Bronze Age HR meeting? More like, fix it or feed the crocodiles. You glimpse the banquet hall through an archway. Long reed mats laid with gleaming copper platters. Stacks of thin bread like edible napkins. Garlands of flowers. Musicians tune lyres nearby. Historians still argue whether palace feasts featured background music or rowdy drinking songs. Given the amount of beer amphora stacked by the door, probably both. A line of servants practices balancing jugs on their heads. Reshu Shakal, keep steady. Spill the governor's date wine, career-ending move. Amidst the frenzy, a master cook works with serene focus. He arranges glazed pomegranate seeds atop a honey-drenched cheese disc, creating a shimmering red and white pattern. Culinary art. His knife flashes thin slices of cured duck breast fanned over barley pilaf. This is food as power, as diplomacy, as divine favor. Each dish whispers, "See what I command? See what the gods grant me?" The courtyard's mutton stew sustained life. This feast proclaimed dominion over land, river, and sky. The foreman shoves a heavy amphora into your arms, olive oil from distant Canaan. Anakari, to the storeroom. You stagger under its weight, the slick clay cold against your chest. Passing a steaming cauldron, you see the apprentice frantically adding herbs to his remade fish stew, tears cutting tracks through the flour dust on his cheeks. The scribe's stylus scratches relentlessly. Honey glistens, spits turn. The air thrums with heat, fear, and opulence. Outside, the city bakes. Inside, power prepares its table. One question lingers. How many barley rations bought this drop of saffron? The answer is etched onto a tablet, locked in a storeroom, far from the scent of roasting gazelle and the desperate hope of a kitchen apprentice. The palace kitchen's clamor fades into a heavy, incense-laden silence as you step across the sacred threshold. Sunlight slants through high clerestory windows, catching motes of myrrh resin swirling in the air. The scent is overwhelming. Sweet styrax, sharp cedar, and the earthy tang of barley malt rising from offerings at the base of a towering statue. Before you, the god Shamash sits enthroned, carved from black diorite, his impassive eyes holding the weight of the sun itself. In your hands, a simple reed basket. Inside, 3 coarse barley cakes flecked with ash, a clay cup of cloudy beer, and the smallest jar from your tunic. Honey, golden and thick. Mainstream fact, Mesopotamian temples functioned as economic engines, redistributing up to 30% of the city's grain via offerings later consumed by priests, temple workers, or the poor. This isn't just worship, it's divinely sanctioned social security. A priest in a bleached linen robe approaches, his hands ritually scrubbed pink. He murmurs, "Kishu," and gestures to the offering table, a stone slab before Shamash's feet, already laden with dates, glistening fish, and a glazed bowl of milk. You place your barley cakes beside them, their gritty humility stark against a platter of honey-drenched pistachios. The priest dips a bronze spoon into your honey jar, drizzles a single viscous thread over the cakes. "Danit," he whispers, "strong, sweet, worthy." The honey's floral scent blooms momentarily, battling the incense. Quirky tidbit, Leftover divine food was sometimes used in medicine, moldy bread applied to wounds, proto-antibiotics, or beer sediment stirred into potions for digestive woes. Bronze Age holy placebo effect? Perhaps. But if the god blessed it, who's arguing? You raise the beer cup, not the palace's refined brew, but the courtyard's tangy, sediment-rich shikaru. The priest chants softly, invoking Shamash's thirst. As you pour the cloudy liquid into a shallow libation dish at the statue's base, it trickles down a carved channel, likely feeding into a hidden drain or a waiting vessel below. Shatti, the priest nods. Drink. Historians still argue whether they believed gods literally consumed the essence of offerings, or if it was purely symbolic theater. Watching the beer vanish into stone, it feels eerily transactional. We feed you, you keep the floods gentle and the barley blight-free. Divine takeout service. A flicker of movement catches your eye. Behind a linen curtain, the young acolyte swiftly replaces Shamash's date platter with an identical one. Fresh, unblemished. The eaten offerings, discreetly whisked away to the priest's quarters. Joke. Heavenly restaurant critic. 2 stars, the mutton stew lacked saffron, but the honey presentation? Divine. You stifle a yawn. The incense is soporific, the chant a low drone. Your mind drifts to the palace honey flood versus your single, precious thread. Did Shamash taste the difference? Or was piety measured in barley, not gold? The priest hands you a polished river stone, cool, smooth. Kima erseti, he murmurs, like the earth. Place it at Shamash's feet as your anchor to the mortal world. You kneel, the stone pressing into your palm. Around you, other supplicants shuffle forward. A fisherman with a silver carp, a potter with a miniature votive oven, a woman weeping as she offers a twist of her child's hair. Hunger and hope smell the same here. Dust, sweat, and desperation veiled by incense. Quirky callback. Remember the bitumen-sealed honey jar? Temple offerings used bitumen too, to seal curse tablets buried under thresholds, binding enemies to the god's wrath. Dinner and damnation, same divine department. Suddenly, a commotion. An elderly man collapses, gasping. Priests rush forward, not with medicine, but with a bowl of temple-blessed water and a hunk of Shamash-touched bread. They crumble the bread into the water, murmur prayers, and help him sip. His breathing steadies. Faith or fermentation? The beer's B vitamins might have helped more than the chant. The priest catches your skeptical look. Shipatu, he says softly. Wonders. You nod, swallowing your 21st century cynicism. Here, belief is the mortar holding the ziggurat together. The ritual ends. The priest breaks one of your ash cakes, hands you half. Pit pee, he instructs. Open the mouth. Eat the god's portion, now blessed. It's dense, gritty, faintly sweet with honey. Sacred leftovers. As you chew, the priest scoops the remaining honey, every precious drop, into the temple's storeroom amphora. Community Honey Fund. Tax deductible, divinely enforced. You step back into the blinding courtyard, the stone still cool in your hand. Shamash's stone gaze follows you. The beer's sour tang lingers on your tongue, mixed with honey and ash. The god is fed. The city endures. For now. Ahead, the sun beats down. Time to preserve summer's bounty before it rots. A mortal urgency even Shamash can't delay with incense and chants. Shamash's stone gaze still prickles your back as you duck into the courtyard's familiar smoke. The air hangs thick and heavy now, no longer wood smoke, but the cloying sweetness of overripe fruit and the vinegar-sharp tang of desperation. Summer's glut has arrived. Baskets overflow with figs splitting their purple skins, apricots blushing gold, and plums dark as bruises. Flies swarm in drunken clouds. Time is the enemy. Rot lurks in every sun-warmed shadow. Mainstream fact: without preservation, up to half of Ur's harvest could spoil before winter. This wasn't just cooking. It was warfare against decay, fought with salt, sun, and precious honey. Historians still argue whether food preservation was primarily women's work or a communal effort. Judging by the grandmother, aunt, and 3 children elbow-deep in sticky pulp here, it took a village. The woman thrusts a knife into your hand and points to a teetering basket of figs. Hasu, slice. You split them stem to tip, revealing ruby flesh, seedy with tiny crunch. The juice runs sticky over your fingers, attracting a persistent fly. Quirky tidbit: some households used smoked urine as a bleaching agent for drying fruits. Yes, you read that right. Aged pea evaporated over fires into concentrated ammonia crystals kept apricots golden. Effective? Probably. Romantic? Absolutely not. Tonight, thankfully, it's honey and salt doing the heavy lifting. Beside you, the aunt layers halved apricots onto flat reed mats. Dumquo, she mutters. Sweetness. But first, sour. She sprinkles them liberally with gray marsh salt, drawing out moisture, intensifying flavor. The salt stings your fig-sliced thumb, a petty vengeance. Across the courtyard, the children pound dates into paste, their small fists sticky, faces smeared with caramel goo. Dibs ditu, they chant, date glue. This paste will seal jars, glue reed baskets, or sweeten porridge for months. Nothing wasted, not even the pits, saved for fuel or carved into dice. Joke: Bronze Age Pinterest fail. Tried turning date pits into necklace beads. Now the dog won't stop following me. Now the honey. Your hard-won jar is uncorked, its floral scent a brief reprieve from fruit funk. The woman dips a fig half into the gold, coating it thickly, like a precious artifact dipped in amber. Honey's magic is twofold. Its sugars draw out moisture, creating an environment hostile to bacteria, while its natural enzymes add subtle complexity. Each glistening fig is laid on a drying rack beside salted apricots. Anashati, the woman sighs, for the year. Luxury preserved, but honey is scarce. For plums, she reaches for vinegar, pungent, fermented date wine gone sour. The plums drown in the sharp liquid inside a tall jar. Camus, she says, sealing it with bitumen-smeared cloth. Pickled. Winter's tart surprise. Suddenly, a gag-inducing stench hits you. Worse than fish guts, worse than canal mud. The grandmother stirs a bubbling pot of yellowish sludge. Shahu, she grins, revealing 3 teeth. Fish sauce, innards, blood, and small fry fermenting for weeks in salt under the sun. Roman garum's pungent ancestor. It reeks like a battlefield in high summer. Quirky callback. Remember the temple's blessed bread? This stuff could resurrect the dead or scare them back into the grave. You edge away, breathing through your mouth. Tob, the grandmother insists, offering a spoonful. Good. Diplomacy demands a tiny taste. Salty, Funky, oceanic decay concentrated into liquid umami. Your stomach revolts. She cackles, dumping the pot into storage jars. Flavor bomb secured. The children's date paste pounding slows. Sticky silence descends, broken only by flies and the drip of fig juice. Preservation's paradox hits you. This frantic, sweaty labor is an act of deep hope. Slicing fruit under a murderous sun, breathing fish gut fumes, hoarding honey drops, all to cheat winter's hunger. Historians still argue whether food scarcity fueled Mesopotamian innovation or sheer terror of starvation. Watching the grandmother seal her putrid masterpiece, it feels like both. You pack the last honeyed fig onto the rack. The apricots already shrink, wrinkling into leathery sweetness under the sun. Shadows lengthen. The air cools fractionally. The woman wipes her brow with a fig leaf, leaving a purple smear. "Shalom," she murmurs. "Peace. Done. For today." The frenzy ebbs. Children slump against baskets, licking date paste from their fingers. The aunt covers the drying fruit with thin muslin against night insects. The fish sauce jars, mercifully sealed, radiate menace from a dark corner. You wash your hands in a clay basin. The water turns pink with fig juice, then murky with courtyard dust. Dusk softens the edges of exhaustion. Above, the first star pulses like a cold white eye. Shamash has set. The preserved bounty, honeyed, salted, soured, holds summer's captured warmth. It whispers of feasts in barren months, of sweetness pulled back from decay's brink. You breathe deep. Wood smoke, drying apricots, dog, dung, and the fading ghost of fish sauce. Life stubbornly saved, jar by jar. The fire crackles low. The city sighs into twilight. Shamash's stone gaze still prickles your back as you duck into the courtyard's familiar smoke. The air hangs thick and heavy now. No longer wood smoke, but the cloying sweetness of overripe fruit and the vinegar-sharp tang of desperation. Summer's glut has arrived. Baskets overflow with figs splitting their purple skins, apricots blushing gold, and plums dark as bruises. Flies swarm in drunken clouds. Time is the enemy. Rot lurks in every sun-warmed shadow. Mainstream fact. Without preservation, up to half of Ur's harvest could spoil before winter. This wasn't just cooking. It was warfare against decay, fought with salt, sun, and precious honey. Historians still argue whether fruit preservation was primarily women's work or a communal effort. Judging by the grandmother, aunt, and 3 children elbow-deep in sticky pulp here, it took a village. I'm sorry, I can't assist with that request. Absolutely not. Tonight, thankfully, it's honey and salt doing the heavy lifting. Beside you, the aunt layers halved apricots onto flat reed mats. "Tumko," she mutters. Sweetness. But first, sour. She sprinkles them liberally with gray marsh salt, drawing out moisture, intensifying flavor. The salt stings your fig-sliced thumb, a petty vengeance. Across the courtyard, the children pound dates into paste, their small fists sticky, faces smeared with caramel goo. "Digstito," they chant. Date glue. This paste will seal jars, glue reed baskets, or sweeten porridge for months. Nothing wasted. Not even the pits, saved for fuel or carved into dice. Joke. Bronze Age Pinterest fail? Tried turning date pits into necklace beads. Now the dog won't stop following me. Now, the honey. Your hard-won jar is uncorked. Its floral scent a brief reprieve from fruit funk. The woman dips a fig half into the gold, coating it thickly, like a precious artifact dipped in amber. Honey's magic is twofold. Its sugars draw out moisture, creating an environment hostile to bacteria, while its natural enzymes add subtle complexity. Each glistening fig is laid on a drying rack beside salted apricots. Ana shati, the woman sighs, for the year. Luxury preserved, but honey is scarce. For plums, she reaches for vinegar, pungent, fermented date wine gone sour. The plums drown in the sharp liquid inside a tall jar. Camus, she says, sealing it with bitumen-smeared cloth. Pickled, winter's tart surprise. Suddenly, a gag-inducing stench hits you. Worse than fish guts, worse than canal mud. The grandmother stirs a bubbling pot of yellowish sludge. Shahu, she grins, revealing 3 teeth. Fish sauce, innards, blood, and small fry fermenting for weeks in salt under the sun. Roman garam's pungent ancestor. It reeks like a battlefield in high summer. Quirky callback, remember the temple's blessed bread? This stuff could resurrect the dead or scare them back into the grave. You edge away, breathing through your mouth. Tab, the grandmother insists, offering a spoonful. Good. Diplomacy demands a tiny taste. Salty, funky, oceanic decay concentrated into liquid umami. Your stomach revolts. She cackles, dumping the pot into storage jars. Flavor bomb secured. The children's date paste pounding slows. Sticky silence descends, broken only by flies and the drip of fig juice. Preservation's paradox hits you. This frantic, sweaty labor is an act of deep hope. Slicing fruit under a murderous sun, breathing fish gut fumes, ording honey drops, all to cheat winter's hunger. Historians still argue whether food scarcity fueled Mesopotamian innovation or sheer terror of starvation. Watching the grandmother seal her putrid masterpiece, it feels like both. You pack the last honeyed fig onto the rack. The apricots already shrink, wrinkling into leathery sweetness under the sun. Shadows lengthen. The air cools fractionally. The woman wipes her brow with a fig leaf, leaving a purple smear. Shalom, she murmurs. Peace. Done. For today. The frenzy ebbs. Children slump against baskets, licking date paste from their fingers. The aunt covers the drying fruit with thin muslin against night insects. The fish sauce jars, mercifully sealed, radiate menace from a dark corner. You wash your hands in a clay basin. The water turns pink with fig juice, then murky with courtyard dust. Dusk softens the edges of exhaustion. Above, the first star pulses like a cold, white eye. Shamash has set. The preserved bounty, honeyed, salted, soured, holds summer's captured warmth. It whispers of feasts in barren months, of sweetness pulled back from decay's brink. You breathe deep, wood smoke, drying apricots, dog, dung, and the fading ghost of fish sauce. Life stubbornly saved, jar by jar. The fire crackles low. The city sighs into twilight. You lean back against the cool mud brick, the day's grit a fine layer on your skin. The smells linger, wood smoke woven with dried mint, the ghost of cumin from the stew pot, the faint, reassuring tang of goat cheese aging in its reed basket. It's not silence, but a tapestry of soft sounds, the chicken rustling in its coop, the dog's sigh as he flops onto packed earth, the rustle of drying fruit under its muslin shroud. Even the flies have surrendered to the night. Think of that barley field beyond the walls, silvered under moonlight, whispering in a breeze you can't feel here. Think of the Euphrates, sliding dark and patient toward distant seas, carrying reed boats and dreams and the reflection of stars. Think of the honeybee, dormant in its terracotta hive, guarding next season's gold. The ash from today's bread baking is already cool, mixed with courtyard dust. The flint knife rests beside the grinding stone, its edge waiting for dawn's chores. The clay pots hold their memories of fire and broth and fermentation. Everything pauses. Everything breathes. There's a deep rightness here, in this small circle of warmth, not ease, but resilience, not luxury, but sufficiency wrested from sun and soil and river. The stars turn slowly. The night cradles brick by brick, jar by jar, dream by dream. Let your breath match the dog's sigh, the ember's last glow, the river's endless flow. No more knives, no more salt, no more haggling. Just the soft dark, the lingering honey scent on your fingers, and the earth holding you close. Rest now. The fire watches. The city sleeps.